I was still wearing my doctoral gown when I realized my mother had forgotten my graduation. The auditorium lights were dimming, families hugging and taking photos on the stage behind me. Laughter echoed across the hall. Parents lifted bouquets. Cameras flashed like tiny bursts of celebration. My phone stayed silent in my hand. When I finally called her, she answered on the third ring. In the background, I heard loud music, plates clinking, people cheering. "Oh," she said casually, like I had interrupted something minor. "We already had dinner." "Dinner?" I asked. "Your brother's barbecue party," she replied. "You know how important tonight was for him." I stood there in my cap and gown, surrounded by strangers celebrating a moment my own family had ignored. My father grabbed the phone next. His voice was impatient. "Stop being dramatic," he said. "It's just a graduation." Just a graduation. 10 years of sleepless nights, research papers, and sacrificed holidays reduced to that. I ended the call quietly. That was the exact moment I decided something simple and irreversible. I would change my name. And I would never go back. I grew up in a house where achievements had a strange kind of hierarchy. My brother's victories were loud, celebrated with backyard parties and proud Facebook posts. A decent football game, a new grill he bought, a promotion at the auto shop, each one deserved applause. Mine were quieter. Or maybe just inconvenient. When I was 12 and won the regional science fair, my mother said, "That's nice," while helping my brother practice for a baseball game. My project sat on the kitchen table for 2 days before someone moved it to make space for pizza boxes. In high school, I graduated at the top of my class. My parents came, but only after my brother insisted we leave early because he had a date waiting. College was the same pattern. Phone calls that went unanswered. Achievements that received polite, distracted responses. My mother had a habit of saying, "You're the independent one. You don't need us as much." At first, I believed that was a compliment. But independence, I learned, can also be a convenient excuse people use when they don't want to show up. By the time I began my doctoral program, I had already stopped expecting applause. Still, some small part of me believed that earning a doctorate, something no one in my family had ever done, might finally be enough. I was wrong. And that realization changed everything about who I would become next. I started noticing it in subtle ways, like a slow drip that eventually hollowed me out. During family dinners, my accomplishments were footnotes. "That's nice," my mother would murmur, barely looking up from her plate, while my brother described his latest weekend adventure in vivid, exaggerated tones. My father's eyes would flicker toward me, impatient, as if my presence were a mild inconvenience. At holidays, I brought projects, research posters, awards stacked neatly in boxes. They stayed on the counter, untouched, while the conversation flowed around me. When I asked questions about their day, they answered in clipped sentences, then returned to screens or gossip, leaving me to navigate the silence. Even small moments stung. A casual glance at my notes, followed by a smirk. A pause before someone remembered to congratulate me. Tone of voice, warm for everyone else, clipped and neutral for me. It was the little betrayals that carved the deepest grooves, the missed birthdays, the unreturned calls, the sighs when I spoke about my work. Each one whispered the same thing: "You don't matter as much." By the time graduation arrived, the pattern was so ingrained I didn't even hope they would care. But the sting, that quiet, simmering betrayal, fueled something sharper, colder, and brilliantly deliberate inside me. I stood outside the auditorium afterward, the tassel on my cap swaying gently in the evening breeze. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and spilled champagne from the celebrations winding down inside. My phone buzzed again, another call from my mother. I didn't answer. In that quiet moment, something shifted. I could feel it like a weight lifting and settling at the center of my chest. All the years of being minimized, the subtle insults, the invisible milestones, they weren't my burden anymore. They were theirs. I realized that no amount of achievement could force recognition from people who had already decided how much I mattered. Their indifference wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was a mirror of their limitations. The thought came with a strange clarity. I could erase the part of me that existed solely for their approval. I could step into a life where my success didn't need their validation, where I defined the meaning of my milestones. I wrote down a new name on a scrap of paper and felt the finality of it in my fingers. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But in that still, decisive moment, I knew I had crossed a line they could never follow. I was done waiting. I was done asking. I was finally free. I spent the next weeks quietly mapping out my exit. There was no rush, hasty decisions could leave traces, and I wanted this to be precise, irrevocable. I created a new identity methodically: legal name change, updated records, professional licenses under the new name. Every form, every signature, every detail was double-checked for consistency. I kept copies of important documents hidden, encrypted, and off-site in case they ever tried to track me. My doctoral credentials, the culmination of years of research and publications, were updated under the new identity. Journals, certificates, digital profiles, LinkedIn, Orchid, every record now reflected a version of me they would never recognize. I canceled shared accounts quietly, redirected correspondence, and gradually erased digital traces that tied me to the family they had neglected to honor. No confrontation, no dramatic announcements, just silent precision. I also secured new housing, banking, and professional contacts. Every step reinforced the reality: I was severing their access, not with anger but with logic. By the time the final paperwork was processed, I was untouchable. They could look for me, call my old number, even ask around, but every trail ended with a calm, unmovable boundary. It was perfect, not vindictive in a noisy sense, but devastating in its quiet inevitability. The day I signed the final documents, I felt a strange calm. My old name, my old identity, existed only on paper that no longer held power over me. I walked out of the clerk's office with a new license in my hand, sunlight glinting off the embossed letters, and felt the weight of years lift in a single, invisible gesture. I changed my email, my phone number, even my professional profiles. Invitations to family events bounced back silently. Calls to check in were met with a polite wrong number or went unanswered. They had no idea I was gone, they only noticed my absence. Months later, a mutual acquaintance mentioned my graduation in passing, and I realized they had never even congratulated me publicly. My brother had thrown another party, my parents had celebrated as usual, but I wasn't there, and no one questioned it. It was quiet, subtle, almost invisible, but the impact was absolute. I had carved a life where their indifference couldn't reach me, where their casual dismissals could no longer diminish me. And in that stillness, I felt an unexpected satisfaction, the kind that doesn't need applause because it belongs entirely to me. I had left, but the echo of my absence spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. Weeks passed, and the absence I engineered settled like a shadow over them. Calls went unanswered, messages ignored, and my old social media accounts gradually faded into silence. My parents mentioned me once or twice, a fleeting reference that barely lingered before they returned to their routines. My brother asked after me only in passing, as if forgetting were easier than confronting the emptiness my absence created. Friends who had quietly supported me began noticing the pattern. "They don't even acknowledge your work," one said, shaking their head. "It's like you never existed for them." I let the words sink without explanation. There was no need. The truth was in the gaps, the silences, the small pauses where recognition should have been. Their reputation as a close, supportive family began to crack in subtle ways among mutual acquaintances, whispers of favoritism and neglect spreading quietly. For me, the stakes had never been about humiliation, they were about self-worth. I reclaimed years of being undervalued, proving that my achievements were never dependent on their approval. The lesson was clear and quietly devastating. Recognition can't be demanded, it can only be earned, and sometimes the only way to claim it is to step entirely out of reach. They learned it in the most absolute silence imaginable. I sit now in my own apartment, walls lined with books, awards, and memories I finally own without apology. The quiet hum of the city outside feels like a steady heartbeat, grounding me in a life that is completely, irrevocably mine. I no longer measure my worth through the eyes of those who once dismissed me. Each achievement, each step forward carries its own validation. Some nights I think of them, wondering if they ever noticed the space I left behind. But those thoughts are fleeting, they no longer hold power over me. I've built relationships carefully with people who see me, not the shadow of expectation I once carried. My work continues, my publications gain traction, and I am recognized by colleagues who understand effort, dedication, and talent. The future is wide open, unbound by old patterns, and I step into it with a calm certainty I never knew I could feel. I am free to define my milestones, my successes, my happiness. And sometimes, when I pass by a quiet cafe or a sunlit park, I allow myself a small, private smile. The world doesn't know me as they once did, and that, I realize, is the most complete recognition I will ever need. I am finally my own witness, and that is enough.